Hello and welcome to the Ideas Factory once again. We are back with you after a short break as things are limping back to getting better. I will not say normal, but especially here in India, in some of the cities like Delhi, things are getting slightly better, but some of the cities are still reeling under the impact of the new variant of COVID-19. And most of the countries around the world are very, very worried with the new Indian variant and are preparing to fight this new variant. Whereas other things are going on in this backdrop, we shall look at some of the important events around the world. Joining me is Professor Harsh Pant. Welcome back, Harsh. And
Thank you, Ragma. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for joining. We know it's been a very difficult time for all of us and all the families. Everybody has been dealing with the current situation. So after a short break, we are back on the Ideas Factory. Harsh, I want to begin with what's happening in Israel and Palestine. That's, again, one of the things that's very disturbing, the visuals that are coming out of the Gaza Strip now. We've seen the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has requested the UN and the US to intervene. The civilians are taking shelter in the UN schools while Israel continues to launch land, air, and sea strike. But also the Hamas continues its rocket firing. In between, in this crossfire, are the common people who are caught there. A couple of questions. This is after a spell of years. This is again a fresh round of very heightened violence. Now, the president asking for help and intervention, do you think the UN and the US can intervene really and control the situation here? And Gaza is very, very significant in the entire Arab politics. How will it also affect the new improved relation which Israel had developed with UAE and some of the other Arab countries, in Bahrain and other countries?
Nagma, things have been moving very, very quickly across the spectrum in the Middle East. And, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that nations and other groups are trying to ascertain where Mr. Biden and his administration stands on key matters. Because, right or wrong, there was a certain clarity with Mr. Trump. From the very beginning, he was, very, very openly supportive of Israel at the expense of, Palestinians. And also, he had a certain, engagement, certain outreach with Arab Gulf states. Traditional American partners. I think the sense that you are getting now from Biden administration is that they're still assessing, which way to go. One day they say Saudis, they take on Saudi Crown Prince directly. The other day there is a sense that they want to engage with because it's an important player after all, Saudi Arabia. Then you also get a sense that one day Israel is to be hectored about its record. The other day, the next day, you hear engagement with Netanyahu and how important Israel, a partner Israel is. So I think a lot of what is happening seems to me, to just figure out what this administration is all about, and the other actors responding to it. So if you look at, for example, the so-called emerging rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, again, I think it's very early to say what might happen, but I think it's also a response to this back and forth on the Iranian nuclear question. From Obama to Trump and now to Biden, we have seen an entire spectrum, and so the regional states are not sure what to do. Similarly, on I think Israel and Palestinians, both sides are not sure which way this dice would roll, and which way Mr. Biden and his administration, how would they respond to this? So I think both of them, Hamas on the one hand and Israel on the other, are trying to lay down some of the rules of the game, some red lines for each other as well as for Biden administration. And unfortunately, from the we have even during this particular crisis, we have not seen that clarity. Because initially, it was America that prevented the UN Security Council from coming together on this question, which is quite bizarre. After all, if there is if the Security Council can't work on this kind of a crisis, then what is it for? But then now we know that on Sunday there is going to be a meet, and then perhaps things would be discussed. But I think again, given the kind of support that America has traditionally given to Israel, I don't see any way of Security Council coming to grips with the situation. I think at the end of the day, it will be America itself that will have to take a more robust posture in de-escalating the crisis, because at the moment Israel feels that Hamas needs to be taught a lesson, and they want to go all out. Hamas feels that they really have shown Israel that they can take on a mighty nation, and they will they are not willing to budge either. So unless you have a robust American intervention, or you have Arab states which are being talked about. For example, Egypt is seen as a leading candidate for this, to bring some sort of a rapprochement, some sort of a de-escalation. Unless that happens, the situation is likely to continue to deteriorate, which is very unfortunate, because you will end up with a humanitarian catastrophe at the end of it, which I think neither side wants, and which would further, lead to a sort of a degenerative effect on this already very, very volatile region. So I think what we are looking at when we are looking at this question of what is happening between Israelis and Palestinians, there is an element of domestic politics, of course, with domestic instability in Israel. There is an element of regional situation where countries are moving back and forth from Abraham Accords now to Saudi-Iran rapprochement, and there is a global angle where America and Biden administration is still trying to figure out what to do with this, and in the midst of it all are the vulnerable populations of both sides, which continue to feel the pain every day.
The big question is, will America intervene, or will there be a robust intervention from America? And first of all, for that, as you pointed out, the Biden administration has to be very clear about its policy and not go back and forth on what exactly is its policy towards Israel, actually the present conflict that's going on. Also, will the Arab nations, or can the Arab nations intervene? And you spoke of the Abraham Accord. What will be the future of the new and improved relation that Israel had developed with Bahrain, UAE, and some of the other Arab countries were following? So that remains a big question to be seen. If we move on to what's happening between India and UK, UK is very, very worried right now about the new Indian variant, and that's why that has stopped or stalled its full opening. But at the same time, we know that Prime Minister Modi was invited there as a special guest at the G7 summit, but now he's going to participate virtually. But that does show the significance or the tilt that UK has taken, in its relation with India and the focus on Indo-Pacific. So how significant is that? Prime Minister Modi is going to be present there virtually, but being invited there, and the India-UK relationship, the way it's turning.
I think this is a particularly interesting moment in UK-India ties, because both sides recognize that this might be a very unique opportunity to settle some of the long-standing questions like trade and migration issues between the two countries, and also lay the foundation of a sort of a more modern partnership. UK-India have had a historical relationship. We often talk about our past, but that has failed to galvanize the relationship. So now, because Britain is worried about post-Brexit foreign policy, its engagement around the world, Britain is also worried about China and how China, the illusions about China have been put aside. So I think Britain is looking forward to engaging India more substantively and resolving some of the key fundamental issues that have sort of been obstacles. And India also looks at this as an opportunity, because for India, this is a unique moment where India can perhaps push UK in delivering some of its commitments that UK has not. For example, we saw the immigration accord that was signed, and that the movement of professionals to UK, which has been a big point of contention, and gradually we are seeing movement on that front. We are seeing the two countries openly talking about possibility of a trade trade deal, which has been again very, very difficult to resolve. And I think the fact that I think today India and UK converge strategically, unlike any time in the recent past, is a very significant moment which both sides are keen to exploit. And the invitation to Prime Minister Modi, or the fact that Johnson administration has invested in India so much, the fact that Indo-Pacific strategy, their integrated review talks about Indo-Pacific being one of their core concerns, and how India is going to play a very important role in that matrix. I think all of these are pointing to a wider British role, or at least a potential and aspiration to play a wider role in global politics, a more robust role in global politics post Brexit. And engagement with India is going to be one of the central pillars. And for India, of course, this is a moment to reciprocate and to see how far India can go with London on managing some of the long-standing problems. And now that China is seen by both sides as a challenge, as a problem to be managed, I think a lot of the questions get resolved without actually going into the differences between the two sides. So I think certainly this is an interesting moment for both sides to take forward, and also in a context of some competition with the European Union, which is also interesting.
Absolutely, and the India EU, like you mentioned, that has also seen a new vigor. And the recent engagement or the recent meeting between India EU leaders, which saw Prime Minister Modi interacting with about 27 EU leaders, was also great optics, but also very, very significant commercially. We know that European Union is a big trading partner, or India's largest trading partner. So how do you see this? This also, it's very evident that EU is also keen to get its India policy right.
Yes, I think if you look at both UK and EU, the most important aspect here is that they are now coming to terms with perhaps their failed China policy of the last 2 decades. And I think once you recognize that you have that there are limits to your China policy, what else is there to do but to look at the Indo-Pacific space, Indo-Pacific geography with a new sense of purpose. And I think that's what both sides are doing, UK and European Union. And of course, European Union finds in India a very, very important partner, of course, for reasons which are, some of them are about democracy and about similar politics, similar political systems. But there is the larger strategic convergence is what is compelling at the end of the day, the two entities. And it was interesting because when you talk of optics, how many of those 27 leaders talked about India's support during the time of crisis. Interesting to juxtapose at a time when the government is getting a lot of criticism for vaccine diplomacy. I think there was almost an attempt by the European Union to shore up in Indian government and say, look, you helped us and we are willing to reciprocate. And I think that is, in some ways, the idea that European Union stands in solidarity with India, that European Union is perhaps going to be a more credible partner. There is an underlying, sense there, both with respect to UK and also to a certain extent, if you think in terms of America, which in the initial days of Biden administration, there was a lot of criticism in India that Biden administration was not prompt in its response. It took the Biden administration 48 to 72 hours just to respond, to India's demands or to India's needs. So I think there's an element there where a lot of these, interesting developments are happening in a slightly more competitive context, which is good for India because it gives India greater room for maneuverability. And I think for European Union, again, trade becomes an important aspect. That for India, it is important to showcase that India is not running away from the world. There is, again, a lot of criticism that India has faced on RCEP, a lot of criticism about trade protectionism in India. And I think the fact that India can potentially negotiate even a limited trade deal with the European Union or with UK can underscore and can go a long way in underscoring that India remains committed to an open economic order and to a rules-based trading order, which India continues to make an argument about. So I think the challenge for India is that it is important, it is imperative to take these relationships forward. The challenge for European Union is to make sure that at a time when their China policy is crumbling, to shore up their Indo-Pacific and India policies.
Absolutely. So some of the big takeaways from this meeting were, of course, important was also the commercial aspect of it. And now when we look at the neighborhood, Harsh, our neighborhood, Bangladesh or Nepal, and we know the increasing China influence there or China's footprints. But something very interesting happened in Bangladesh, especially. Bangladesh has also retorted. The Chinese ambassador, the Chinese diplomat there, raised an objection that Bangladesh should not be joining Quad. Now that's a different matter whether Bangladesh was joining the Quad or was there an invitation yet or not. But foreseeing that Bangladesh could probably join the Quad and warning against, and then Bangladesh retorting and saying Bangladesh is a free country and will make its choices. But at the same time, it was a strongly worded statement there from Bangladesh. But at the same time, the relationship beyond this continues. The vaccine diplomacy continues. China's footprint is increasing there, especially in Bangladesh. So how do we understand this? Of course, there has been a growing influence there. But can Bangladesh and Nepal really afford to be independent of China's influence there, considering all the benefits that they are getting from China?
I think, in some ways, I don't think that China's influence, economic influence in particular, can be prevented in South Asia. I think China is a global economic actor, and I think that is what it is going to. It will engage with everyone, including in India's vicinity. I don't think India should or can and should make this about China-India competition. I think what India can do is to present an alternative to many of these countries and to make India a more credible actor. But I think what is interesting is how organically some of this opposition is coming out. Right? I mean, first of all, forget about Bangladesh being invited to Quad. Quad would not be Quad if more than 4 countries are there. Yeah. So no one is inviting anyone to Quad. Quad has not articulated a more expansive role. Quad has just said that it is willing to work with like-minded countries. But I think what it shows is that Quad has really made Beijing vulnerable. That Quad is one issue on which Beijing gets agitated. It gets nervous. And I think that's a good thing for India, and that's a good thing for the 4 Quad players, because I think there are very few issues on which Beijing is on the defensive. And I think this is one issue where you see now, visibly you see this happening. So for all the proclamations that Quad doesn't matter, that it is, it is going to dissipate, we now know that China is worried about it. That China is now targeting countries on Quad where even those countries are not, hardly involved. So I think this is something that is going to accentuate. I think this is something that India and other Quad members should be prepared for, that increasingly China would demand this. Because while China continues to say that this is, Quad is something about Chinese containment, it is Chinese behavior that is making it an us versus them kind of a scenario. And I think this is going to be a challenge going forward for the Indo-Pacific, because China is now going to demand, especially from smaller countries, that you toe our line or you go and work with the other powers in the region. And I think that's going to be a huge challenge for smaller countries. And Bangladesh has been exceptional in terms of just speaking it very, very categorically that India or China, it does not matter. We would decide our own foreign policy. And I think that's what in my sense is most likely to happen. The more aggressive, the more this kind of a publicly demeaning foreign policy China follows with smaller countries, the greater pushback it's going to get. And I think there perhaps Quad need not be another regional players need not be that worried, because I think that opposition will happen organically. Countries are going to react in this manner organically, because you really in this day and age cannot dictate terms to countries. And I think Chinese diplomats are being too undiplomatic when they are resorting to these kind of tactics. But the larger question, of course, which you were raising, is that China's footprint is going to continue to increase, and it will be, and the smaller states will use that to their advantage. If they find that that's going to give them greater room to maneuver with other states like India, with other powers like America, they are going to use it. Similarly, they are also going to use their proximity to India vis-a-vis China. Some things that you also see happening in the case of Mr. Oli in Nepal. You mentioned Mr. Oli has been very, very deft in playing India and China. Initially, he was all hawkish on India. Suddenly now his hawkishness is gone, because he also feels that there are players in Nepal who are more pro-India that he can use for his own political power at home. So now suddenly he's all, he has put Chinese projects on hold. He's not talking about BRI. He's all, he has all mellowed down. So I think this is what is going to happen, and we should be prepared for it, these ups and downs of China-India diplomacy in South Asia.
At the same time, yeah, it also provides a great opportunity for the smaller countries. It is a challenge for them, but a lot of them are also playing both sides. China is making it difficult for them to choose between us or them. But yes, this challenge is continuing to be there. Thank you so much, Harsh, for that analysis. So that's all from us on this week episode of Ideas Factory. We hope to see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.